Hello, Matt and George
Hello.
on a Tuesday. I didn't know you guys,
Exist on
existed
Tuesdays?
on
Yeah.
a Tuesday.
I usually don't work Tuesdays, but today I decided because we're off Thursday for Thanksgiving, thankfully.
I
Thanks. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
and I normally run a professional wrestling camp every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, which is why we can
Yeah,
do the stream on Thursdays. But
yeah.
Yeah.
given that we have Thanksgiving, we had to move things around a little bit. So I had to take the mask off and put the headphones on, and let's talk a little bit about
Would love to hear
technology.
more about that.
I know, life of a lucha libre.
Yeah.
So,
So you guys, we are talking about something. It's kind of funny actually because I'm traveling because of Thanksgiving. So I'm this topic is very funny because I'm not compliant with any of it. But we're talking about ergonomics today, right? Right,
yes.
Matt? It's very relevant. It's still super relevant. And I think the discussion around ergonomics, while always prevalent to a healthy office, got really important because the individual had to start figuring out how to ergonomically plan out their workspace at home since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's clear to see the dust has settled a little bit. A lot of people are still working remote, or they are working remote a big chunk of the time. And we're revisiting that topic to be like, all right, let's re-examine our work from home spaces. What do we need to do? What kinds of things do you need to do to maximize your productivity, make yourself as comfortable as possible at home, all those things, because I certainly know there's still things I need to fix. And again, funnily enough, I'm in a ergonomically not super sound situation right now.
But it is a chic situation.
Yes, I've got the now.
Yeah.
If this was Brooklyn, people would. This is Denver, but this was Brooklyn. People would be like, "Where'd she get that?"
That's like an $18,000 a month studio apartment in Brooklyn.
Everyone's like, "What are they paying this girl?" What is anyway, yeah. So we're gonna discuss ergonomics. And Matt, do you want to kick us off on that? Yeah.
I think the first thing I'd like to say is that we are in no way medical professionals. And the advice that we're going to give today is really, I think, a little bit more on the common sense side of things that we've observed, things that we've experienced over the past couple of years, more than, say, best practices to setting yourself up for success or anything like that.
Refresher, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's basic stuff. Like, I don't know about you, Megan, but from the very beginning of the pandemic, there was something that George talked a lot about related to offices. And it was, it was I'm trying not to say obsession because we're going to go over one of my obsessions in a little bit.
How good I was at my job.
Yes, but then he would talk about how he would have to stand at a desk in order to really talk about how great a job you're doing. Sitting at a desk wasn't the same. So George really got into an adjustable desk because working at an appropriate height is a very important part of working in a healthy manner.
Yeah, talk about
it. Standing desking is not necessarily a fad. I think the under your desk treadmill might be a fad. I'm going to put that into fad territory.
Yes.
But the stand desk and standing and working has a lot of benefits. If you sit for any length of time, it really weakens your hips, your back. There's a lot of health reasons. Now, obviously, standing for 12 hours is probably bad too, right? There's a retail, or if you were nursing or medicine or that sort of thing, construction. So standing is really bad. So I think there's a really important as a knowledge, doing knowledge work or technical work or programming, whatever it is. You really got to find that balance of sitting and standing. And even if you don't have a sit stand desk, it's worth standing up for even a call. Hey, I'm going to stand up, just adjust the camera, adjust the mic or a headset.
It helps the energy though, right? With the call.
It's like smiling when you're on a phone call.
Well, it's also it's important to remember that
I do that in sales all the time.
I don't think that humans were ever designed to really sit in one place for any period of time.
I don't think
that's not what we're designed for.
We weren't even meant to sit in these kind of chairs. We're meant to squat. It's like we're very, our bodies are not. We're kind of forced into these kind of.
But not to get too off into a tangent, but even the way that our bodies physically function are not exactly designed for the way that we live, with respect to even the most basic metabolic needs and positioning. And that's why they've got that super cool potty thing that you see on the internet all the time with the unicorn. I mean, our bodies are not designed to be positioned the way that we position them, and that's one of those issues.
I wasn't going to go there, Matt, but yes.
I think it's important. That's a very valid thing to say. It's a little strange to talk about, but that right there is proof that the seats that we sit in are not really good for us.
So keeping that in mind,
I was like, is that way? Sorry, go on.
So you always want to adjust the height of the desk or the workspace for the appropriate angle for your hand resting or keyboard mouse.
Elbows.
You're right, and your elbows where everything or where everything's going to live. So that height is really important in both, like where the monitor is, where the desk height is, your chair height. You want to adjust, and you want to adjust it a bit throughout the day. And some really nice fancier desks have presets, so you can set it for different things. But at the very least, you want to at least stand up for at least a portion of every hour.
Yeah.
Just to get that circulation going. I know I try. The other thing, if you have a wireless headset or depending on your setup is, if you can walk and talk, that's really powerful sometimes, depending on what you're doing. Or just, kind of, I would say pace, because that gets a little strange, depending on your space, but that getting up and moving up. So I think it's important to stand desk. And there's some other cool options out there in terms of either a monitor arms to raise and lower the monitor, as well as raise and lower the keyboard. So really important.
Yeah. And I gotta say that, when you started talking about the tables, you mentioned that they're not a fad and that there are a lot of other things that are. And you're right. I mean, it's not something I thought about too much until you started talking about these types of desks, but I've had my jerker from IKEA since 2003. And it's been in the standing position the entire time. And it's so much more comfortable to work at than most desks that I've had.
I regret at one point here at Valiant, we had about 20 of those jerker desks. And when we changed offices, we gave them away to everybody. And then they became unobtainium.
They're a cult classic. Mine's never going anywhere.
Yeah.
But that being that we're talking about different spaces in which we work, I think that it's important to talk about truly dedicating a space to work.
If you can.
If you can, obviously, this is not something that's always doable, but I think it's similar to what you'll hear a lot of people talk about with regards to mental health and our bedrooms. Our bedrooms are meant for sleeping. A lot of people say, you know what, try not to watch TV in there. Don't watch the movies. Let that be a place for rest. And the same thing goes for having a place for work that, is contained and, quite frankly, something that you can step up away and walk away from at the end of the day, and then allow yourself to have some healthy division, even though that desk that you're working at may be in the middle of your living room or your kitchen or who knows where you have it in your house. There does need to be some kind of like a line of demarcation between it and the rest of your life.
It has a real and I spent the pandemic in a Brooklyn apartment. Very lucky. It was a 2-bedroom, but we were able to make that an office space. But the mental health impacts of like when I would really be much more strict with myself and be like, this is your dedicated workspace. Don't carry the computer around, like this is where you work. This is where you do your job. And that I always felt more productive. I always felt more capable. And then on my time, on my lunch break or when I needed to rest, I felt so much more restful. And it's really important to dedicate that workspace. So if anyone's let that fall away a little bit, just remember that's a really important, like you said, boundary to draw at.
Also, part of that is setting up the space to go back to like proper ergonomics, proper keyboard, mouse. Unfortunately, I think a lot of folks end up doing a lot of work on laptops that, and if you have to do some real heavy duty editing, knowledge work, kind of writing, it's, sometimes it can be great to work on a laptop in an unusual position, but man, I don't know if any of you ever tried doing like a pretty large budget or a complex spreadsheet. It's really hard. It doesn't lend itself to that kind of work. I know Matt, when you're doing editing or you're doing any kind of development work, you don't want, the laptop, it'll work to a point, but not really.
Yeah, it'll work. And if I'm using it, I usually have a keyboard connected to it because the feel of a laptop keyboard is not something I find to be sustainable for long periods of time. You're not getting any kind of tactile feedback from a lot of those keyboards these days, and they don't feel that great. But we're gonna get that. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. Don't get me too excited too quick.
I'm giving you a preview. So we're keeping on time.
We're talking about dedicating a single space, and we are 2.5 years into everything right now. So I think that the next bullet point that I wanted us to talk about today is kind of, it makes sense. Building the right space takes time.
Yes, I could tell you, I know I've moved my space in my house about 5 times in the past 2.5 years.
Oh, we've seen every single angle of the workspace that you're in, but every single time you do it, you have something else that you find that makes you a little bit more efficient or more comfortable. And you can see it. If we were to look at videos from like a year and a half ago to today, very different. Very different in body language
down
and
to the
positioning.
dependable lighting. I think because early on you had the window behind you all the
Yeah, well, right, correct.
which is nice, but it was.
I mean, it's as I said, I'm lucky. I live in a space that has some outdoor lighting and all that sort of thing. But you know, I think you're gonna keep finding what works. It's iterative process to find what works for you. As we were prepping for the stream here, I was like, you know, I have to get a new monitor because the one I have doesn't have a VESA mount, and a VESA mount is a kind of a screw pattern in monitors and other devices so that you can put them onto arms or mount them to different wall kind of kits. So I'm not sure what VESA means. I'm sure it has as anti-acronyms. Acronyms. I don't even want to bother. But what it is how you mount monitors and peripherals to different systems. So, but it's important though. You keep working. I started out with a very not to go back to keyboards, Matt, but I started out with a very low cost, not very good keyboard. And after many hours of real heavy lifting, I finally invested in a really high quality keyboard, and it's game changing. How much faster you can type and accuracy. It gets really interesting.
It can be a real game changer, and we'll get to that in a few. But you're right. I mean, like even with something like lighting, you know, I'll pull back up the title card for today's episode. If you see the light bar that I have over my desk these days, that's something I only purchased like maybe 6 weeks ago. And it's completely changed how I can work. I can change the frequency of the light, the part of the color spectrum it comes from. It's like at 2700 Kelvin right now. And that's fantastic for my eyes while I'm working. Way less fatigue by the end of the day, just by making a small change to the desk. But you know, these types of improvements, these ergonomic enhancements, whatever they are that we do, they make it easier for us to sit down and work. And it's always important to do certain things. Like I'm practically yelling at myself and saying this: don't skip lunch. Always move around. I think it becomes a little too easy to sit down and really get into the work. And then all of a sudden it's like 4 p.m. and you're like, whoa, hold on a second. I haven't had a snack today or anything.
I'll work while I eat. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, well, it's fine. And then it's just like, no, take a break. Like, really.
It's not really ergonomics. I'm not trying to tell you what the appropriate angle of your wrist should be when, you know, elevating a slice of pizza to your mouth or anything like that, or how to dip the chip into the dip. But I think it's important with this overall topic about being comfortable in the space that you work in order to do your work well and do it with a smile on your face, with some cheer, right? That's an important part of getting work done. I'm sorry, what was that, Megan?
Hydrate?
Yes, you have to hydrate. You must stay hydrated. Dehydration is a significant threat. Maybe not all the time, but I like saying it that way because it is important.
Some days I truly have a glass of water and I go, oh, okay, that's what was wrong.
I can feel my cells becoming revitalized.
Yeah, like truly, if you don't hydrate enough. So yeah,
it's important. And I think the last of the 5 things I just kind of wanted us to kind of touch upon today was what's known as the 20-20 rule. George, do you want to kind of go into that? I know you love the splits.
I mean, the idea here is that for every 20 minutes of work, you move, take your eyes off the screen for 20 seconds at least. Something at 20 feet away or further, just to kind of give your eyes the rest and refocusing. One of the problems, you know, there's so many eye strain issues and that occur from staring at monitors. Remember, there's a lighting of the screen on your eye. It all impacts it. You know, if you wear glasses, you definitely want the right kind of coatings on there. But if you know, and once again, if you kind of combine the standing and the eye relief, you can get a really good setup where you're into a habit. You know, another thing that's important sometimes if you're in the zone, you don't want to stop what you're doing, especially if you have like that flow state of mind, you know, you're just really working. If that happens, you know, obviously they stay in that state, but then take a little bit longer time. That's where you walk away, eat your lunch, do that sort of thing.
There's a little bit of a tortoise and hare kind of thing with this. You know, if you push too hard, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to make mistakes. You may not enjoy the work you're doing. And I personally know that has an impact on the quality of work in many cases. But if you pace yourself out and you know to stop when you need to stop and then get back into the work, you may not feel like you're getting as much done, but in the long run, you are getting more done. You're typically getting it done with less mistakes and honestly just doing a better job of it.
And, you know, this had a real effect on, I listened to a story on NPR a long time ago, but I think it really relates. And hopefully it'll resonate. But the reason you have to break up your day is because like people will think, oh, I go on a run in the morning. I do exercise, so it's okay that I sit for long periods of time. And it's like, no, it's the amount you're sitting. It doesn't actually improve that. It doesn't, there's no way to, it's like catching up on sleep. You can't fix it by being really active outside of that. You still are causing negative effects. So all that to say, that's why it's so vital to actually apply don't think you could just push it to 3 hours. I'll work out really hard later. It's like, you need that flow to your day as well. I remember that freaking me out. I was like, I'm sitting too much, but then I incorporated that.
That's absolutely true. And I think that kind of leading into what I want to talk about next.
What is that?
Some of what you guys are rushing me. Give me time here. I'm going to enjoy this. Some of what we've been talking about is to correct some behaviors that aren't necessarily the greatest when it comes to the work that we do. And, you know, sometimes having a sore neck at the end of the day, your hand hurting a little bit or something like that's not a big deal. But when that starts happening over the course of decades as you work, it adds up. You know, that becomes an aggregate problem over time, arthritis and all these other things that we can deal with. And now we're going to get into what that's getting me so excited today is you guys know that I've been on this weird obsession with keyboards lately, and it's not just because keyboards are kind of neat and fun to work with. It's because of some health concerns. You know, I hurt my hands a little bit over the past couple of years with work, and I wanted to find a way to reduce movement. And one of the ways to do that was to look into different kinds of computer accessories and peripherals and changing how I work with computers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I could sit here and go on and on and on about philosophies and this and that. And I'm not even going to do that today because it's just too much. I think what we're going to do is just look at some of the different kinds of boards that are out there, and I'll explain a little bit about how they're helpful, if they're good for you or not. And I'd love to see what you guys think about them as we go through them. So I think what I'm going to start is with some of the biggest boards that I've built over the past few months, work all the way down to the little ones that don't make any sense, just to show the different range of what's available. So let's start off with what's known as a 96% keyboard. The 96% is the scale, or rather the number of keys compared to like your standard 104 key keyboard that we've all become used to over the years. If you buy a Dell, you're probably going to get a 104 key keyboard with your number pad and everything else. And you can get those in a compact size. It's only 4% less. It's only like 4% smaller, but it turns out to be a really great keyboard to work with. You know, it's got mechanical switches. It feels good. It's incredibly durable. It has all the functionality that someone in, say, accounting or like our COO or George would need for some number crunching now and then with the numpad. And at the end of the day, it's actually considerably smaller than your average keyboard.
Right.
It's kind of nice to work on. I'm just going to throw this one over there. Next up, you've got your 10 keylesses. These actually turned out to be some of my favorite keyboards, and they're called the 10 keyless because they've removed the numpad from the right-hand side. You're just saving a little bit of space on them, and they turn out to be incredibly functional. And I have found that if I have a numpad on my keyboard, I'll use it. If I don't have it, I don't miss it. You know, I use the keys on the top of the keyboard instead. So having a board like this is nice because it helps remove a lot of the pivoting motions in my wrists when I'm typing. Mm-hmm. And it's a tiny difference. Actually, this board's the one I'm using right now. It's a very tiny difference, but over the course of 2 weeks, I literally felt a significant improvement in my hands as I was working. I didn't expect that at all. Quite frankly, I didn't expect it because of how much time I was using building these things, the little intricacies that goes into them. I thought I was going to be causing more trouble than good, but in the long run, it's actually working out really, really nicely.
That's cool that you're building them too.
Yeah.
They're fun. Here's another in that same kind of size class, and it's even more compact. It has just as many keys as this board, but it's, again, even smaller. The less your hands have to move, the better they're going to feel at the end of the day. I think that's what I took home from all this work that I had been doing. Yeah. And, you know, that those the 10 keylesses I just showed you are 75% of your typical 104 key keyboard. And I always like pressing things further, so I went down to 65% after that. And this is actually where keyboards get kind of quirky. If you notice, there's 2 space bars on that board. And that is not something that's super typical, and I'll take that off the screen because I actually have it right here. Yeah, you'll see that I've got 2 different space bars on this keyboard. You might think, well, that's kind of silly and redundant, but it actually turns out that it works really well because you're putting a lot less force down with your thumbs as you're typing on, if you're hitting that space bar. And again, it's one of those tiny, tiny changes that makes a significant improvement even over just a period of a couple of weeks.
Right.
Sure.
I was in absolute awe at how well my hands were feeling at the end of the day with some of the changes I had been making. And again, I can't stop there. I obsess over things. So we went down to a 60% board. Now, these start getting really neat because there's tons of custom parts. You can see this one's all kind of colorful and everything. And we've got the rotary encoder, the dial in the upper right-hand corner. And that's actually kind of handy to have because as you have less keys on a keyboard, which again, less hand movements is great, you do lose some level of utility. And you can bring a lot of that back in with the right dial on a keyboard. It's not just about adjusting volume. I've been using them to navigate Excel spreadsheets, to navigate around in Adobe Premiere for video editing. It becomes a knob that I could use with a scrub bar. So it makes my day a little bit easier and more convenient because again, I'm moving my hands around less, and some things that I would use a mouse for, I no longer need a mouse for. And if I'm not switching back and forth, I'm not moving as much, and I'm moving forward quicker with my work. I'm getting things done a bit quicker and with fewer mistakes in the process.
I love this topic and this detail because it's also, and I think before I even, maybe I didn't work in an office before, but I think a lot of people just think, okay, a keyboard's a keyboard is a keyboard. They don't understand that like you can drop.
I think that a lot of people see them as commodity items. They happen to be accessories that come with a Dell computer or an HP or whatever it is that you buy, but there's so much more than that. And getting the right keyboard is getting something that's going to last you for, 5-10 years, maybe more. I haven't built a keyboard in over a decade, but the one that I had built years ago lasted me for a long time. And I think they're fantastic items to have for yourself. It's something that you interact with all day. You don't really interact with a computer. You interact with a keyboard and mouse, and you want this to be as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, and even you showing all the different kinds, it's like there's
so much out there.
They should feel some agency to be like, you might work better with a certain kind of keyboard, and like you said, like it can really help with people with carpal tunnel, all this stuff.
Yeah. Anything dealing with motion or like connective tissue in the hands, you're making a difference. And I'll just zip through some of these other boards. I don't want to sit here and play like Mr. Weird Board Guy today, but here's here's another example of a two-space board. Pretty. Yeah, and if you want like maybe a nautical theme or a little bit of rich mahogany on your desk, this is what you go with, and it looks great and it works beautifully. As I was traveling through the different types of boards, I started learning that there were ones that are designed specifically for programmers and systems administrators. And this is one that got me really excited. It's called the Tokyo 60. And if you look at it, the space bar is a little bit larger than normal. It's 7 units wide versus 6.25. Each unit's like 18 millimeters. And there are fewer other buttons on the bottom. There are no directional pad keys either. There's a lot of stuff missing from this because it works in layers. But all the stuff that's missing are all the things that I would accidentally hit in a terminal while working on a server. So let's think about that again.
Right.
Things that I would accidentally hit that would lead to errors no longer exist on the board. They're there if you need to get to them. For example, if you need to go up or down, you hold the function key, which is the red one, and hit a couple of other buttons. But the fact is that you're removing the risks. George, this is in a way where this is the mitigation of risks with regards to input into the computer. And that was it for like the 60%. And we're just going to cover the 50s and the 40s real quick, and then we'll talk about what all this netted for me. But when you get down to 50s and stuff, things get really interesting. You're going off the deep end. It's almost like going down into the ocean. You're hitting the point where there are like angler fish and giant sea squid and things you normally wouldn't see that seem a little strange at first glance.
Right.
This keyboard right here is not the most typical looking board, and that's because it follows an ortholinear layout. Now, the thing that's cool about an ortho board like this is that they're designed so that when you put your hands on them in the proper position, your fingers are never more than 2 keys away from where you're going to want them to be next.
Wow.
Which means while you're typing, you're not moving your arms. You're not moving your wrists. If you can see here, as long as I'm in that middle home row, I can hit anything I need on the board without moving. And that eliminates a lot of those wrist movements. And that's where things kind of really start to become exciting, because you're like, wow, I'm preventing damage in my wrists and my hands as I'm working, and that's great. It's something we all encounter, and if we can encounter less of that, why not? We'll just get into a couple more, and then I'm going to finish up here.
Yes.
With we're going to get to the weird ones. It'll be done. With regards to ergonomics, if you recall, and George, I'm guessing you've probably owned like one of the old Microsoft ergonomic boards in the past.
Oh yeah, I've had various keyboards over the years, and I've
cut it in half. Cut the board in half, and then move it around however you want. How amazing is that? Yes. It's an ortho board, and it comes in 2 parts, which means it's no longer dictating my wrist position. I'm going to dictate its position for optimal usage and comfort.
Yep.
That's kind of cool. I'm only going to show 2 more. There's so many more to show. It's embarrassing, but
you have said 2 more the last.
I know, and I'm going to show another 2. Don't worry about it. This is a really unique board, and honestly, if anyone here is watching this saying this looks neat, I'm interested, but I don't know where to start, this is not a bad board. This is a board from a company called Keychron, and it reduces the number of keys down to a 40% board, which would be similar to, say, this one, or this one, or this one, except it doesn't have the ortho linear layout, so you don't have to try and get used to a new way of typing. It's small enough that it reduces your hand movements. It puts a lot of the extra keys away where you don't necessarily need to access them at all times. And I've been using that for the past week or so since I got my hands on that one. It was beaten up. I rebuilt it and turned it into something really nice. And again, it's a keyboard that I can probably get to about 115 words per minute on with ease. And to me, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Now, the very last one, and Megan, the reason I flipped through all those boards earlier is so that there would no longer be any 2 more, is a board that I built with no real purpose, but it just shows how inventive the folks that build these boards and fabricate them can be. This is known as an Alpha 28.
Oh, wow.
That's the entire board. And it's fully functional. I could sit here. In fact, I have written entire documents during the workday on that board without a problem. And it's hard to even imagine now that I'm saying it. I'm looking at that photo again, but even that's a fully functional keyboard.
Wow, that's really. What percentage is that? Like 20?
It's probably like a 20 or 22% or something like that. And remember, all these keys are the same size. So the boards themselves, like the buttons aren't any smaller. It's just how large the boards themselves are.
Right, the frame. Some ways.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else is still standardized. So it's not like you're going to sit here and go, well, my fingers are too big for this board.
Right,
no, the board's small. Everything else is the same. So with all of that said, and with all of the photos and all that other stuff, my ultimate conclusion for myself was that having a combination of a TKL board, the 10 keyless, and an ortholinear board is the perfect combination between everyday work, working on a server or a terminal or something where I need function keys. This has become my go-to board. And when I want to do some long form writing and I want to really concentrate on what I'm writing, this is it for me.
Right.
I could write on this for hours and hours with absolutely no discomfort whatsoever. And it's interesting that it took me 3 months in building something like 20 different keyboards to come to that conclusion. And in many groups of circles of people, they would probably say, wow, that's a bit much. That's excessive. No, that's just me. Deal with it. I think George thought I was going to say something profound, and they just got to deal with it. But realistically, if you're passionate about the work that you do, and you want to make sure that you have the right tools, no matter what your profession is, sometimes you do have to get out there, roll up the sleeves, and figure out what works for you. And I did. And I hope that anyone watching this that's ever had any kind of question or curiosity about what you can have on your desk and what it can enable you to do. I know that I didn't sit here and give super deep descriptions, but I've at least shown you about 15 different choices that are out there.
A lot out there.
Yeah. Just the reality is that not everything has to be the beige keyboard or the black keyboard from Dell or HP or whoever it is.
No, and I think we kind of said earlier, but it's like there is some agency there. And if you're having any issues with your keyboard, it's such like you spend a lot of time on your keyboard. It's worth maybe looking into other forms.
I think just a quick question for both of you. Let's say you're going to take a nice walk around the city with your friends and family or something, kind of go do the touristy stuff. Would you rather wear a pair of Converse Chucks or a pair of Nike Airs?
probably Nike Airs, because those Chucks don't support your feet in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you ever walk around? They look great. I love them. I've got a couple of pairs, not knocking them whatsoever. But if you go walking around the city for 8 hours and then when you get home and you take them off, you're not feeling so hot.
Yeah. Yep.
Put the Nike Airs off, you're good to go. And it's the same exact situation with the good keyboards, or keyboard that's right for you. Just like finding a pair of shoes that are right for your feet, they've got the arch support, they're the right width, and all these other items. If you go into looking at a keyboard that way, you're going to end up with something that's going to feel great to type on. It's going to improve your efficiency at work. It's going to reduce mistakes, and it's going to be something that you're going to be able to have for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
So thank you so much, Matt, for showing us all that. And you clearly put so much time in.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly could have gone so much further. I mean, I could have shown you the actual speed build of a keyboard that was made for someone here in the industry, or the board that I had been working on the other night. But again, I go overkill with things, and I don't want to take up too much of your time today. And hey, look, it's 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
So we did pretty well.
George,
yes.
Do you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation before?
No, I think yeah, I said, you know, the thing with keyboards, monitors, mice, that sort of thing, they last way longer than anything than your computer will, right? A good investment in these kind of tools can last many, many years. I know I have monitors that are probably 10 years old that are still very valid and still work.
Yeah.
I've got a computer case with a patina on it.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, especially a good mechanical keyboard or a high quality keyboard, depending on preferences, can last many, many years. And, you know, in terms of reducing waste overall, we shouldn't ship keyboards and mice anymore with computers. You should get a good one and use it until.
Yeah, you should think of them separately. Yeah,
right. They're separate, more complex peripheral. So I think that's it. That's my last message. But this is great.
Great.
Yeah, I hope to say out loud, I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You know,
great Thanksgiving. I believe that we'll be back on next Thursday, because today was sort of a special stream. So it's going to be 5 questions to ask your IT department.
Yes.
Yes. So that's going to be very, especially as we get to the end of the year, to run up to that. So it's going to be some really good stuff. I'm going
to tell you what, we're going to do a little bit of bonus with that. Given that I used to be on the other side of the fence and was an IT director, I think I'm going to throw in 5 questions that the first MSP I ever dealt with asked me.
It's a good one.
And that's great.
Yeah.
Well,
guys, both directions.
Thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving. Eat your fill, and everyone just have a wonderful time with your family. And I hope everyone gets some rest, and think about ergonomically improving your workspace. All right, guys. Have a great day.
All right. Good night.
All right. Enjoy your mashed potatoes. See you next week.
Bye.